Welcome back, happy people, to Chapter 2 of the Redstone User Guide. In this episode, we're going to have a look at all the redstone components and what their function is. Keep in mind, though, that this is just going to be a description of the block and the description of its function. It's not an in-depth look into how you can leverage that function to create stuff. That comes later. For now, the important part is to start to understand what the different blocks are used for, not specifically how to use them. So in Redstone, we categorize the components into 4 main groups. We have our power sources, or power components. We have our transmission components, mechanism components, mobile components, and then we have some other components that we'll look at in the end. The first group of components, our power components or power sources, are pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it's in the name. These are blocks that you can use with your redstone as a power source. The Redstone Torch is a torch that gives off a constant redstone signal by default. If a redstone torch is attached to a block and this block receives a redstone signal, the redstone torch turns off. Like this. As you can see here, we have a redstone torch here sending a signal into a block, and the torch on the other end will then stop giving a signal. If I now turn this off, you will see that this one turns on. The redstone torch will also send signals up and down, so if I place a block up here like so, you can see that the redstone dust up here is also powered. Then we have the block of redstone. The block of redstone is made out of 9 redstone dust and is a power source that is always on. It is, however, possible to move this redstone block using pistons, which makes it very, very useful in a lot of contraptions. Then we have our buttons. Buttons are used to send a redstone pulse signal. Stone buttons create a pulse that lasts 10 ticks, which is 1 second of real time, like so. While the wooden button creates a pulse that can stay on for 15 ticks, which is 1.5 seconds. However, you can shoot arrows at the wooden button to keep it pressed until the arrow despawns, which takes about 1 minute, or it is picked up by a player. Then we have our lever, which is pretty easy. It is simply an on-off switch, as you can see here. I switch it on, the redstone signal turns on, and you can treat it just like a normal light switch. Our daylight sensors can be used in 2 ways. It has 2 modes. It has a day mode and a night mode. In our day mode right here, you can see that the redstone signal is turned on because the sun is up. If I right click this, it will turn into this, like so. Then it is set to night mode. So if I now set this to time set night, you will see that this one turns off. And this guy, well, because of the sun position, let me set this to midnight. The daylight sensor in day mode is now turned off, and the night sensor is turned on. The detector rail is a rail that is used to detect the passage of a minecart. A minecart passes over this type of rail, then it sends a signal out as long as the minecart is over this rail, like so. If you place the cart directly on top of it, it will stay on forever. Jukeboxes are not a very usual block to use as a redstone source, but a jukebox with a music disc playing sends off a redstone signal, depending on the music disc that is set into it. For example, the cat disc only gives off a redstone signal with a power of 2, while the other side, like I have here, gives off 14. Yes. It's however worth noting that if you want to use the jukebox as a power source, you will need a comparator to look at it. We will have a talk about comparators later, but this is the only way that you can get a jukebox to be used as a power source. Then we have our lectern with a book. You can see that I have a lot of pages in here. If I stand on the side, you will see that whenever I flick the page, there is a slight tick of redstone pulse being sent out the back. And then we have our lovely lightning rod. The lightning rod is just that. It's a lightning rod. If a lightning rod is struck by lightning, it will emit a full redstone signal by the strength of 15, like so. Then we have our lovely observer, which is heavily used in contraptions regarding farms and such things. It is observing on the side with a face to the block right in front of it, and if there is an update or change to this block, it will emit a power signal out the back. Like this. Then we have a pressure plate, which will detect entities and or items that are placed on it. So if I walk onto this, then it will emit a redstone signal. The plate will only emit a signal as long as it is pressed down, and it turns off when the entity or item on top of it is removed, like this. There are a couple different types of pressure plates. You have some weighted ones as well, so you have light and heavy. And if you want to look into those, then I suggest you read up on them. They're still just pressure plates, but the difference is what kind of entities and items that will be allowed to press it down. Then we have our lovely target block. A target block will emit a redstone signal when it is hit by a projectile. That can be an arrow, a trident, egg, snowballs, so on. Arrows and tridents will emit a pulse of 10 redstone ticks, while any other projectile will emit a pulse of 4 redstone ticks. The cool thing about the target block is that the closer you are to the bullseye, the stronger the signal will be. So if I hit this with an arrow right here, then you can see that the pulse goes out back. Then we have our trapped chest right here. A trapped chest looks like a normal chest. The only exception is that when it is opened by a player, it will emit a redstone signal out back, which means that you can trap it with certain things. Now I have added a redstone repeater out back here because you only get a very low redstone signal, at least for my demo here. So when I open this now, you should see the redstone repeater and the redstone dust at the end light up. Like so. And then the last of our power sources is the tripwire hook. Now, it's only this block here that's called the tripwire hook. In the middle here, between the two, I have placed string. Now this works pretty much in the way you would expect it to. It is a tripwire, so if any kind of entity or item is touching this string, it will trigger and send a redstone signal out on either side. And as soon as the item or entity is moved back out from the string, then it will turn back off. Now there is one power source that I haven't talked about yet, and that is the Skulk Sensor. I haven't talked about it now because it is not going to be available until 1.19, but I will place a picture of it on screen for you. Now the way this block is going to work is that it will sense player movement, or entity movement, and whenever it hears something, it will trigger. It has a certain range, so if you walk a little further away from it, it's not going to trigger. If you are placing wool, it is going to dampen the noise that you make, but it is now the first wireless redstone source that we have, which in all honesty is pretty cool. Now that should be it for all of our power sources. When 1.19 comes out, I may do a separate video on the Skulk Sensor and add it to the playlist, so that you may get some information on that as well. Then we have our transmission components. These three components continue or strengthens a signal or pulse from our power component towards our mechanism components. So let's start with the one that we use the most, the Redstone Dust. You can't think of your dust as the wire between your components. The wire will be what your signal follows to get where it needs to go, which is pretty straightforward. Next up is the Redstone Repeater. This component will take the signal and repeat it out the front. The maximum strength of a redstone signal is 15. This means that on the block 16, as you can see here, you have no signal. You can see we have the full power out of this torch, and then it will go out to 15 blocks of this redstone dust, and on the number 16 you have nothing. If we place a redstone repeater on block number 16, the signal will continue for another 15 blocks. Now, you have this setting on the repeater, you can set how many redstone ticks between 1 and 4 you want your delay to be. So if we break this off down here and place ourselves a lever, you can see that right now when I flick this, there is a very, very slight delay. Almost nothing because it's set to 1. But if I ramp this up to 2, 3, and 4, you will see that when I flick this lever, there is a 4 tick difference between when I activate this and when this last bit of redstone is activated. This is great if you, for example, want to have one button control 2 things, but the one thing needs to react before the other. You can also, of course, set this to just 1 to have your redstone signal repeated from one end and all the way over to something that is far away. And now we're getting into the part that usually get people confused, the comparator. The comparator is something that we use to compare 2 signals, or we use it to measure how full a container is. The default mode for a comparator is the compare mode. This means that it will compare the signal that it receives from the back to the signal that it receives from the side. You can tell that it's in compare mode by the little light on the front here that is not lit up. So if the signal from the side is stronger than the signal from the back, it is not going to give off any signal out the front. However, if the input from the back is stronger than the input from the side, the output signal will be the same strength as the input from the back. So in this case right here, we have a chest that we are looking into, how full it is. It is only missing 2 stacks, which means that it gives off a strength 2 less than the full strength possible, which in this case is 13. Now I have this lever here, so if I flick this, the redstone input from the side will be 15, which is more than 13, which means that this signal should then turn off. As it does. However, if I add 2 more stacks to this chest, it will turn back on because the signal from the back is the same as the signal from the side. So the one from the side is no longer more than the input from the back. Now if you right click on the comparator, you can change the setting of this little light on the front, and now that it's lit up, it will be set to subtract mode. This means that it will take the input strength from the back and it will subtract the input strength from the side. So if you have a full strength of 15 from the back and a strength of 5 from the side, your output signal is going to be 10. So we can see that I have a full chest here, which means that we will get a strength of 16 to the input on the back. Now on the side here I have a bunch of levers set up, so the closest one will give a strength of 15, and then we will get lower and lower from the side. So we'll start all the way at the end here to give off the least strength from the side, which means that this signal that we have all the way down here to our repeater, which is 15, will get subtracted little by little. So if I now flick this lever, you will see that we get -1 on the full strength. If I flick this other one, we will get even 1 less. And as we flick the levers down the side here, you will see that we subtract more and more from our original signal all the way to nothing. And if we turn them back on, we add more strength to our original signal. And when we flick the lever at the end, our lovely repeater should be back on because we have a full strength from the back of our comparator. Now I suggest that when you get the world download, you take a look at this setup right here and you try to understand for yourself and play with it a little bit to figure out how the comparator works. This is usually the one component that get people confused and they don't use it a lot in their contraptions because they don't quite understand it. Then we are going to talk about our mechanism blocks. Mechanism blocks are basically blocks that do stuff when they are powered. They have different mechanisms. So In the beginning here, we have the Activator Rail and the Power Rail. These are the two mechanism blocks that are connected to rails. The Activator Rail is kind of cool. You can use that to nudge a minecart. So if I sit in this minecart, I will be nudged out of it when we hit that rail. The powered rail, on the other hand, will give you more speed. So if I get into this and we slowly go over here, then we will be zooming along as soon as we hit the powered rail. Then we got our bell. You can of course manually hit it to make a sound, but if it is powered by a redstone signal, it will also make a sound. Then we got our doors and our gates. If powered, they will open. Then we have our dragon heads, which when powered, will go waka waka. We got our note blocks that make sounds, redstone lamps that will turn on, and then we have our item hoppers. If you didn't already know, the item hopper will start to flow items down from itself into whatever chest or minecart with chest that is below it. But if you power it, like so, you see that it does not let any items out anymore. We usually refer to this as locking the hopper. Then we have our dispensers and droppers. The difference is that a dispenser will place the water, place the lava, shoot the arrow or things like that, while the dropper will simply drop the item inside it. Then we have our two types of pistons. We have normal piston and we have our sticky piston. When powered, a normal piston will just push down or up or sideways the block, and when it's not powered anymore it will retract, but the block, if it is not a gravity block like sand or gravel, it will stay in the new position. The sticky piston, on the other hand, will stick to the block, so if we power the same block and unpower the piston again, it will drag the block back down with it. Then all the way at the back here I made a little obsidian box, because here we have the TNT. When TNT is powered by a redstone signal, it will ignite and it will blow up. Then we have our mobile components. I have not set up any demonstration on these because they are pretty much only different type of minecarts and a boat. The boat, of course, you can use on water. It will move by having flowing water, and it can, of course, sink. Now, the minecarts will, of course, go on rails. You have a couple different ones that are worth noting, which is the hopper, TNT, and furnace. Now, these ones, the hopper minecart will act as a hopper, but you can move it around a rail. The TNT is the same. If activated, it will blow up. And the furnace one, if you put coal in it, it will go and power itself. So it is a self-propelling minecart that can push other minecarts in front of it. The chest minecart is just a chest in a minecart. You can load them up and transport stuff all the way to wherever you want. And the normal minecart is something that you can place an entity in. And then we have our other components, which we call opaque and transparent blocks. Now, the opaque blocks, they obstruct light and vision, and they can be used to support redstone components and to transmit power. That means that I can put a lever or a button on these, and they can transmit power through the block and out on the other side. Then you have the transparent block, and they can either be seen through fully, for example with glass, or partially, like the stairs or the slab or the fence. And these transparent blocks cannot transmit power, but they are needed as insulators or stuff like that, because you might need to block some kind of signal going into a very close circuit. And that is actually all of our redstone components done. Now, if I did forget about something, you people that already know all of this stuff and are just watching for fun, let me know in the comments. Keep in mind though that we're not going into details about all of these blocks here. We're just trying to help people get a better understanding of what their function is. And so, now that you know what the redstone components are used for, you can start to make your own little circuits to get used to working with redstone. I suggest that you start by making a simple sugarcane farm using the observers here and the pistons. But whatever you choose to make, let me know in the comments what your first contraption is, or tweet it to me. My socials are listed on my channel page. And next time we are going to have a look at some basic contraptions, we are going to look at item transportation, and we're going to set up an automated smelting system. So chapter 3 will be coming relatively soon, so you don't have to wait for long. And with that, the second chapter is complete. I've been Jack, and that's it for now. Bye bye.